Kenmore City Council is now in session. We have one item in our agenda, business item number 8, Kenmore Downtown Interactive Urban Art Installation presented by City Manager Rob Carlindsey, Public Works Operation Director Jennifer Gordon, and Arts of Kenmore Director Sarah Saloom Hayashi for discussion direction.
Your Honor, if it's okay, can we invite the community members to come up to the presentation table?
Of course.
So Sarah Hayashi and David Arthur and others with Arts of Kenmore. And so a couple of weeks ago, the City Council was presented with a proposal for the urban art installation and gave us direction. Since then, there's been a desire to bring it back and talk about options. And so that's what we're here to do tonight. And Jennifer's here at the table she's our Public Works Operations Director, and she manages our facilities. And so she'll be a good advisor tonight on what's possible, on what can go on our facilities and things like that. Jennifer, do you have any additional thoughts before we?
No, you kind of stole my thunder there.
Okay, that's right.
Hopefully I can answer any questions about installation, kind of possibilities and ongoing maintenance. But I'm really going to hand it over to Sarah and David.
Okay, so just to, again, Sarah Hayashi here. Briefly reiterate, we are discussing the community-driven public art project. And I will say, Arts of Kenmore's take on this, and my personal take on this, is what we are able to manage, what we are not able to manage. Under our fiscal sponsor umbrella, we extend our 501c3 status to small arts organizations like As If Theater, and so that they can maintain as an independent organization, but also community-driven public art projects. And in this case, yes, of course, we took on this project. It originally had a different plan, has come to this, and we are open to discussing where how we can move forward. Okay, thank you. So possible presentations going forward. In my original presentation, I had at the very end stated a next project that would be how we would manage appropriation or appropriate additional funds raised and additional product, which in this case is paint, under a fiscal sponsor and our contract with the community organizations. We have to, that's in the contract, that they have to either identify another in-like organization for the funding to go to and or product to go to, or it comes back to Arts of Kenmore. And the project that we were focused on, that the committee agreed to, is the 4 sidewalk corners. That, if you do remember the original design with the bubbles, that was our first design for this, would be one corner instead of going with a chevron. It would be a design using the pride and chevron flag colors, but in an art form. The other 3 corners would be designated to commission artists in other communities to really fully represent everyone in our community. So one corner would be, we would commission a Black artist to represent BLM, another Black Lives Matter. Another corner would be designated for a Latinx artist. That artist we have identified, and the fourth corner would be, could either be Indigenous. I have talked with Ty Juvenile about that. He would like another artist to do it, or it could be go towards Asian Islander. So just really bringing more dialogue into our community. One of the things that is okay, in my background with public art, one of the most important things with public art is to create installations that represent something specifically. And identify that community, tell one part of that community's story. These four corners would definitely tell many parts of our immediate community, our story. Her story. Her story, not history, her story. And within that, in urban art, in our industry, it is really important that we encourage dialogue and not provoke dialogue. And therefore, it would be, and David, you will need to speak for the committee, but this is one project that also Arts of Kenmore is capable of managing. There are projects like the crosswalk would have taken much longer to prepare. And that is a much bigger project that Arts of Kenmore, we are still volunteers, don't feel that we're capable of managing that. So, and then with the sidewalk corners, just in considering the maintenance, is foot traffic as opposed to car traffic. So it's a probable alternative, and it brings about much more dialogue to our community visually.
I was just going to add, Sarah, so we had talked about the other corners, determining what that art will be down the line. There's nothing to be, decided upon or voted on tonight. We're just talking about the one.
Yes, that would be a different presentation, a different budget, a whole different project, really.
So then as far as what we're looking at tonight, the options that we're presenting to the council as far as choices for the Pride themed art.
So from the original presentation, the steps, City Hall steps is still an option. The sidewalk corners is another option. For where we're at right now. Both are projects that Arts of Kenmore can manage. Both are reasonable maintenance. All tell terrific stories. But it does come, yeah. One is definitely on government property. One is on city property.
So we just open it up for open discussion and question
Yes.
answers.
Unless you want more, I can get.
All right, Councilmember Baker, and then Councilmember Kugler, and then Councilmember File.
So I voted no last time, and I think the principal reason I voted no, because the public had no warning of this. We are criticized all the time by doing things in secret. This was done in secret because it's the first time I ever heard about it. So that was my big objection, is the public. And if they'd have been notified, it would have been different.
Councilmember Kugler?
Well, my question was actually sort of in relation to what Councilmember Baker brought up. I mean, we did vote for this 6-1 at our last meeting, so I would like to hear more about why this has come back as a special meeting.
All right, well, then I'm going to kick it straight to Councilmember Shrubnik then, and then we'll go to Councilmember Fowl.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak for my own self on it. First, I, want to apologize for not being prepared enough last Monday to kind of say what I felt. We received the materials on that day, and I frankly didn't have a chance to really absorb what was being proposed. That's not an excuse. Provides a little bit of context. Definitely not a good excuse. And I want to thank Sarah and Arthur and the rest of the group for coming up with great proposals. And I stand by what I said last week, which is, not having no to the crosswalk be the end point. I was disappointed that we couldn't make that happen for this year, but I mean, you guys persevered and I really appreciate that. Including getting a professional design for the curb cut and, the whole thing. So, but I have to say, after I voted in favor on Monday, I did actually the next day have misgivings and felt, I'd kind of been swept up in the moment and, just had misgivings about the rainbow painted steps in particular. And I'll just say, why for me that I, felt that way. There are several kind of minor reasons, for me, minor, what would the chevron actually look like on the steps and, how would it look when it aged and, what if we wanted to bring the stairs back to original condition at some point? What would the process be? I mean, those were kind of minor points. Somewhat more significant is we had, essentially at that point, zero public process, which, several folks have said. That was a somewhat more concerning, but more fundamentally, for me, I just really believe that City Hall per se, the building of City Hall, shouldn't be a venue for really any kind of speech art. And I'll say a little bit more about that. I personally really like the rainbow. I believe that it symbolizes inclusion and support for the rights of people who identify as LGBTQIA and others as well. And I really want that message to be loud and clear. So, I mean, I just put that out there, but I have a lot of other beliefs too. I mean, I believe in women's reproductive rights. I believe in the ERA. I believe in Black Lives Matter. I believe, I'm against anti-Asian hate and anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bigotry. And, I could continue. I guess I don't assume that everyone in our city shares my beliefs. And actually, I'm pretty sure that some people wouldn't feel included in our city and may even feel alienated if we kind of emblazoned my beliefs on City Hall. That's the rub that I have. It isn't anything about this particular symbol. It's more a symbol of beliefs on City Hall that more fundamental to me. Similarly, a few years back, I described how alienated I personally felt seeing a Christmas tree inside City Hall. And, some people said, oh, well, we should keep it and just add a menorah and other religious symbols. But sort of like this current issue, there's really no way to include them all. Someone's always going to have beliefs that aren't represented. And obviously the Pride rainbow is not a religious symbol. And, you know, some would say it's not even a political symbol. But it's similar in that it represents a set of beliefs that I actually adhere to, but it does represent a set of beliefs. And I just feel like we have a diverse community and we want to continue to welcome diversity. And I feel like our city hall is somewhere where we want everyone to feel welcome. It's a special singular place. And, you know, yeah, we're a little city, but like the halls of Congress, you know, this is the people's house. This is the house for everybody, all people, regardless of their beliefs. And so I personally feel like in order to be inclusive, this building, the look of this building should remain neutral and not itself be an expression of beliefs of subgroups or even council members. But that said, I really hope that the rainbow finds a home in Kenmore. I mean, I love the crosswalk idea. I like the curb cuts, smaller, but I still like it. And ideally, in the words of Love Notes, you know, somewhere that would inspire surprise and delight. And not animosity. I want this to be a really positive thing. So that's where I'm at.
Councilmember File?
Thank you. I want to point out, we do have council rules for how motions are to come back at meetings. During a regular meeting, at the end of a meeting, it has to be seconded, and then there has to be a discussion. That has not taken place. There has been a jump to possibly abuse our own rules while using the escape of a not so common Robert's rules. So I want to put that on the record first and foremost. Secondly, it's our duty to be prepared for meetings. That's on each of us. It's our responsibility to be prepared and ready to take action on what's before us, even if something changes last minute. And I am aware that this issue has come up in our one-on-ones as early as back in January or February. I am aware that the Kenmore Community Pride Organization had requested a crosswalk last year and was told to come back this year. I am aware that a community group came together, made up of the community, our community, that includes each and every one of us, and of the community of diversity and intersectionality. That is a rare and beautiful thing. One of those jobs and tasks we have as public officials and leaders is to uphold a welcoming and safe community. That is actually something we had all agreed to as council members, not just in our guiding messages, but in proclamations like the safe and welcoming and affirming community, a safe place, and our LGBTQ proclamation, let alone a resolution on DEIA. So when the majority has led the city in a direction, it's also our duty to move along with the work and create that welcoming, inclusive, affirming community. This is a marginalized community that has typically been left out in the past, harmed, experienced violence, harassment, intimidation, made unwelcome in local government, made unwelcome in libraries where books are read by authors or written by authors who are of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, two-spirit community. We are, as elected leaders, are supposed to have the wherewithal to support all aspects of our community, regardless of race, creed, color, origin, gender identity, culture, and sexual orientation. I will also say this as a member of the LGBTQ community. I know what it's like to face discrimination. I know what it's like to receive it from the dais, from the community. I know what it's like to be stalked home and have my car vandalized. I know what it's like to have my transgender son be beaten up by 3 people in the bathroom. Only probably because of his age, that he was younger, he survived that moment. But I know all too often, people in our community do not survive those moments. Creating a safe and welcoming, inclusive environment means that we all have to step up and do the work. This also means lifting up our community and working together. There is unity for people who have faith. There is unity about accepting your neighbor and valuing your neighbors, being kind to others. Sometimes that doesn't take place in our community, and we have to do the work. So I'm not too fond of how this has come back to us in this pathway. Those of us who are very firm on rules, I'm going to be very clear about that. But I'm not going to pivot from my original vote. I know that there's a series of art that's coming to Kenmore that includes a bunch of different cultures, meaningful cultures by the artists of the community. And that's important. Our DEIA advisory committee had direction in this. This also was presented at a Love Note meeting with great reception. And in comparison, why some people have tried to attempt to make this a political thing, this is about welcoming, affirming, safe communities. It's about what we do with our art, what it symbolizes. So for that reason, I'm not going to change my original vote. I'm not going to adapt my vote to make other people comfortable who are made uncomfortable by their original decision. Uncomfortable is implicit bias. Bias is taking your actions and then applying it and creating differences and division within our community instead of unity. And this is where I stand with my colleagues. I am mission driven to welcoming, safe, affirming community for all.
I want to address the question that was kind of at the beginning of Councilmember Files' comments about how this meeting came to be. And I will also say I'm not particularly happy with how we got to this place also. I do, though, view it as my role as the chair to ensure that folks are, well, there were problems. One was, a lot of us do have day jobs and a lot of us are very busy right up until council meeting. So getting materials the day of is not acceptable. And if I had realized if I'd been thinking ahead when I saw those were published, I might have taken off the agenda and pushed it to a later meeting so that folks could have time to properly digest the materials in front of them, because I think a lot of us did not have the time to do that if we were rushing from our job to our meeting. Two, I view it as my role of the chair to ensure that folks are comfortable with, or at least that we reach decisions in a way that's fair and allows folks to actually look at the materials and make a decision that's based on, being able to deliberate and not just having to make a snap decision at a council meeting. I know that's an uncomfortable feeling for everybody, and it's not just this issue. There are other things that have come up very quickly at council meetings that are less than ideal from a decision-making standpoint. That's why I called this meeting, because I heard from multiple colleagues who were after the fact may have had some buyer's remorse. That said, I also don't like revisiting topics, and I personally am not changing my vote on this topic either. But I did feel like we needed to actually have a robust discussion, because that was something that I think was stifled by our inability to have materials ahead of time. And I am asking not that this is tied to this particular issue, but after going through this, I have asked our city manager to, if we don't have it, if we don't have items and materials finalized by the Friday before a meeting, to remove things from the meeting so that we do have time to actually work as a body and make decisions with all the information in front of us and time to actually think. Because I don't know about everybody here, but making a decision based on something I've had half an hour with can be a little difficult. So I say all that to say that I'm unhappy with the situation also. But I felt like it was in the best interest of the council to at least have a meaningful decision. Councilmember Baker?
Yeah, while I agree with everything the council member File said,
Microphone?
on,
Okay.
while I agree with everything council member File said, my objection is the public still doesn't know, because it has not been broadcast to the public. The public has a right to know. This is their building.
Councilmember Baker, your microphone was turned off. Your microphone was turned off partway through that.
I guess when he said, turn it on, I saw the light and I turned it off. Sorry about that.
Councilmember File?
I just want to point out that, sometimes we're CC'd on emails because of our diversity of a council. For example, if members of the LGBT community have something that they want me to know about, I often am BCC'd or CC'd when it's out to other folks at the city staff. So I saw packets as early as 3 weeks prior to our meeting. They weren't added up to the moment of the meeting, which is very unfortunate. Now, this has had a second pass, which it does mean that it's been out there in the community. This is not funded by the city. This is a nonprofit organization that had worked together with members of our own community for art. So there's also that. When we look at our city hall, we see a number of different incorporations of welcoming art, inclusive art, culturally responsive art. And art is a beautiful thing. This is a temporary project, one that can last, 10, 12 years. I understand that there'll be some updating along the way. For just maintenance. I'm comfortable with that. One last thought is, normally we get a lot of emails when our community is upset about something. I think I've had 4 or 5. And in comparison, when talking with maybe 1 or 2 colleagues, I think the most I ever heard was 11. I say that because it's interesting. Art inspires discussion. It inspires feeling and emotion. Everybody has opinion about art. And as I remember, our community had some feelings about the mural on St. Benny's that had, as I understand, a lot more, feedback of non-support, yet people came to love and enjoy it. The same as when there were banners on, the cement factory. That being said, I think we have to find a place for creating a safe, welcoming, inclusive Kenmore, responsive of the arts, responsive of culture, identity, and create people-oriented places where people like to gather and feel welcome. We have 3 entrances at this building. 3 entrances, a way to get in. So if you don't like one, you can always choose another. That's one thought, school of thought. And I really appreciate everyone here today. I appreciate the show of support for those who support a diverse and welcoming, affirming community. I appreciate the community showed up with some differing views as well in those couple, 4 or 5 emails I received. And I'm always open and available and reachable. My cell phone is on the city website. Anybody can call me. And I welcome that. So moving forward, I just think this is an unfortunate way to have something come back to us. And if we're going to have rules, we should follow our rules. Because I do know that if I came back with something like this, it would not have come on to a special meeting.
It would have been if it was more than a couple people, and if we'd had the flaws that we had that led us to making a decision with only a couple hours notice with the materials. And again, I'm not saying I am unhappy with how we got to this place also. And there's a lot of things that we could and should have done differently leading up to now. But I also view my role as a facilitator here to ensure that we're reaching decisions in a fair manner that gives folks time to actually deliberate. And that's something that we lacked at that last meeting. Mr. City Manager.
I failed to mention that our DEI consultant, Chen and Kelly Ray, is watching, and she's available to be part of this conversation if you'd like.
Thank you. Councilmember Kugler.
I have a couple of comments on a few different topics. I will just voice that I also am really displeased with how this came back to another meeting. I feel like every council member knows if they're not ready to vote, they can abstain. Every council member knows they can also voice if they're not ready to make a decision. And so I do feel like this is sort of unprecedented for me. But that said, I feel like what I'm most concerned about is the fact that this topic is being brought up because the issue is being presented as though this art is not appropriate for City Hall. I mean, from the last meeting, I was very enthusiastic about it because from my perspective, I think the perspective that was most important was community input. And this was a community-driven art project. It came from community. Additionally, I feel like it is very much in line with our espoused values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And representing art that represents one group does not mean it excludes any other group. In fact, I feel like if we go in the direction of including everyone or being wanting to make everyone feel comfortable, we are totally missing the point of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As Councilmember Files said, we're talking about a group that is historically not been treated equally under the law. So, I mean, I'm definitely not going to change my vote on this. And I'm also just very disappointed that we are revisiting this.
Deputy Mayor.
We're human. I'm just going to say that. We're a council of people elected by our community. And we make decisions as they're presented to us. But sometimes there's a question that comes up. And I think this discussion's been very important. Do I wish I had asked some certain questions about maybe we could prioritize it? I was a real fan of the curbs because it was something I'd seen in another city. As a person who cares about equality and the pride flag and what it means, and a community member had written in, I think probably the most important thing to me that I'd heard about this flag, that it goes beyond a person's sexuality and preference. It's really geared towards humanitarianism in the long run. But not everyone understands that. I did have some questions about, geez, is this the right place to put this now? I'll be honest, visually looking at it, just the sketches were hard for me to interpret, but I was supportive because these rights and the freedoms of people in our community are incredibly important to me. So I understand our council rules. I know it's really, and this is what I'm going to say, it was a hard thing for me to ask a question about because I wanted to be on the right side of the decision. And that's the truth. I wanted to support this. And I didn't know how to say, well, maybe could we look at some other ideas? I didn't have that in me. That's my truth. I'm just going to share that. I had questions like, is this the right decision? And I think it's really important that we have these conversations. This is City Hall. I was like, I think we should push it to the curbs. I'm just going to tell you, this is me today. Let's just move it to the curbs. That's safer. It felt safer. I also wanted to name 181st Diversity Way and create opportunity for all sorts of other for sidewalks and really create something special there. I also understand that we had a 6-1 vote that we were enthusiastic about. And if anyone heard my enthusiasm about the importance of public art, I was like, oh, we're not a museum or City Hall or the People's House. I'm going into this because this isn't it. Bringing this back, I was like, oh, is this the best art for our city? I wanted lights. That's what I really wanted. I wanted lights at night and then curb cuts. But for whatever reason, I didn't say it that night. I would have loved a better visual representation, more like the curb cuts, so I could see it. But listening to this conversation, thinking about what it is to have courage. We don't always have the same taste in art and what we see, but I understand the intent and meaning behind the stairs. And it's something about beauty and representing all people. I'm not changing my vote. I appreciate everyone's comments. Thank you. One thing. I agree with Mayor Baker, former Councilmember Baker, and Councilmember Shrubnik. I think this is something that would have merited more public inclusion, but it was a community process. So it's like, it was a community process. Community was involved, it was presented, but I hear where we had concerns with that, but I'm sticking with my original vote. Thank you.
Ms. Kelly Ray, I see that you have your hand up. You're muted.
Thank you so much for allowing me to address you. I wanted to make sure, because I talked to Sarah and David and Lily and others regarding this project, and I want to dial back first and speak to this issue of courage, because when you have conversations around equity and inclusion and belonging and accessibility and justice, in any topic where the public discord represents a very divergent, broad spectrum of opinion, it does require courage. And what I know for sure is that conversations in this space, people are always very afraid of. People are afraid of being on the wrong side of what they anticipate, what they expect for folks to say. People are very afraid to come out on the wrong side of an issue, on the wrong side of history, on the wrong side of what they believe will be acceptable. But people are afraid, and people are afraid to be canceled for having an opinion where they may want to stop, slow down, pause, seek other insight. And so I think courage is a very appropriate word to characterize where I'm sure many, and not just at the dais, but many find themselves in these conversations. People have asked me, well, what does it mean to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? For example, in the month of December, when you represent holidays, some people have shied away and said, let's not, it's so that we can make sure that we leave nobody out. Let's just not do anything. Let's do nothing, because then no one's left out. But it's important to note that art is speech. And you can come out on any side of speech, and we can have different opinions of art, and our aesthetic tastes and styles are as diverse as the people that create art or consume art, but art and its medium is speech. And you're right that City Hall is the people's house. It's the seat of government. And when you make a choice or decision, you have to make sure that not only are you being inclusive and not leaving out the voices, though they may be smaller in number. You'll see that in your equity tool. Don't discount a group just because they're small in number. But it's important to also remember that Kenmore City Hall is this space that is supposed to be reflective of the foundational values, the goals, the thing that ties a community together, but it's supposed to be representative of the community. Now, you'll have some people that will agree with having the rainbow flag or the chevron colors coming up the risers of the stairs, and some people will be adamantly against it. But when it comes to speech, what I'll caution you is this. When you open the door, for one, be prepared that you're going to have to create equal access and equal time and share to other forms of speech. Because people will say, well, which stairs do we get? Because they got prominent stairs. So should we get the shiplap on the walls behind the dais in the council chambers? Well, then we should be entitled to the wall as soon as you walk into the city hall to the left. Because art is still speech. And when you hear one, be prepared to hear all. And I say that because when you open up this thing that is the infrastructure, that is the building, that is the physical manifestation of government, other members of the community will want access to speech. And then the challenge will be deciding what speech is acceptable and what speech is not. And then what will be the rules of governance and what will be the metric to decide whose art you like and whose art you don't. And so I wanted to make sure that I offer that as you deliberate and make your decisions. Always be brave and stand firm in your truth. Uphold, as you promised to do, the foundational values and the mission and goals of the Kenmore community. But be very intentional, be very deliberate, and be very clear in your expression of your why. Because all of the community should know not just where you stand, but how you've come to that place. Because at some point in the near future, you'll have to defend that and then open yourselves up to other forms of speech in the form of art as it is offered at City Hall. Now I'll stop in case anybody has any questions, but then I'll be quiet.
Actually, before we, City Attorney.
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to clarify some of the comments. I agree that art, of course, is a type of speech. And I also agree with the comments regarding be intentional and thoughtful. And the reason I'm making those points is to distinguish from government speech, which is what you are doing. Government speech is the collective decision of this council to say something, express something through art, through a flag, but you get to make that choice. You have not opened it up to the public like a public forum, like a park. A park is clearly a public forum. But this decision and people bringing you ideas, that's one thing. But you as a council, again, have the right to determine your speech. And that doesn't open you up to being required to do all other speech or symbols, expressions. You get to decide that. And I just wanted to clarify that after those comments. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. I just want to take a temperature of my colleagues really quickly because we are on a time crunch a little bit. And I've already heard from 4 folks that are not going to change their vote from the original, 4 being the majority of the council. Unless there's any objections, I would just adjourn the meeting because I believe we've already made a decision. There are no objections, we are adjourned.